Then Imam al-Barbahari, rahimahullah, he brings a point number 87. وَاعْلَمْ أَنَّ الشِّرَاءَ وَالْبَيْءَ حَلَالٌ إِذَا بِيعَ فِي أَسْوَاقِ الْمُسْلِمِينَ على حكم الكتاب والسنة من غير أن يدخله تغرير أو ظلم أو غدر أو خلاف للقرآن أو خلاف للعلم. He's saying, rahimahullah, and know that selling and buying is lawful if it is carried out in the markets of the Muslims in accordance with the rulings of the book and the Sunnah, as long as no deception, oppression or treachery is committed, nor anything contrary to the Quran or contrary to what is known. Shaykh Fawzan, hafidhullah, he said in explanation, we hold as our belief that al-bay' wa shira', buying and selling, is lawful. He, the Most High, said, وَأَحَلَّ اللَّهُ الْبَيْءَ وَحَرَّمَ الرِّبَى, Surah Al-Baqarah, the second surah, ayah 275. With the explanation, whereas Allah has permitted trade and He has forbidden usury. He has forbidden riba, that which they call these days interest, misnomer interest, riba, usury, whereas Allah has permitted trade and forbidden usury. And of course the second ayah, يا أيها الذين آمنوا لا تأكلوا أموالكم بينكم بالباطل إلا أن تكون تجارة عن تراض منكم. Surah An-Nisa, the fourth surah, ayah 29, with the explanation. O you who believe, do not devour each other's wealth. Do not devour each other's wealth unlawfully, but only in lawful trade, by mutual consent between you, upon the basis of mutual consent between you. And he quotes the third ayah, يا أيها الذين آمنوا إذا نودي للصلاة من يوم الجمعة فاسعوا إلى ذكر الله وذروا البيع ذلكم خير لكم إن كنتم تعلمون فإذا قضيت الصلاة فانتشروا في الأرض وابتغوا من فضل الله. Ayahs 9 and 10 from Surah Al-Jumu'ah, as will follow inshallah. With the explanation, O you who believe, when the call to the prayer is given on the day of Jumu'ah, then proceed to the remembrance of Allah and leave off trade. That is better for you if indeed you know, if indeed you knew. So when the prayer is completed, then disperse upon the earth and seek from the bounty of Allah. Shaykh Fawzan said, meaning seek provision. He explained the last part of the ayah, وَابْتَغُوا مِنْ فَضْلِ اللَّهِ. The explanation, seek from the bounty of Allah. Shaykh said, meaning seek provision. Then he brings the continuation of the ayah, وَاذْكُرُوا اللَّهَ كَثِيرًا لَعَلَّكُمْ تُفْلِحُونَ. The ayahs we said, ayahs from Surah Al-Jumu'ah, 62nd surah, ayahs 9 to 10, with the explanation. And remember Allah plentifully, so that you may prosper. Then the Shaykh said, and he said with regard to the mosques, يُسَبِّحُ لَهُ فِيهَا بِالْغُدُوِّ وَالْآصَالِ رِجَالٌ لَا تُلْهِيهِمْ تِجَارَةٌ وَلَا بَيْعٌ عَنْ ذِكْرِ اللَّهِ. Surah An-Nur, the 24th surah, ayahs 36 to 37, with the explanation in the context of the mosques, wherein He, Allah, is glorified in prayer, in the mornings and the evenings, by men who are not preoccupied by trade nor by sales, away from the remembrance of Allah. Shaykh Fawzan explained, he said, لا تلهيهم, they are not preoccupied, they are not diverted away. He said, he did not say they do not buy and they do not engage in trade. Rather, he said, they are not diverted by their trading away from the remembrance of Allah. Rather, they attend the mosques and they pray along with the congregation. Then they go off to their buying and their selling. And buying and selling is from the purest ways of earning, if they are free from rish, deception, and khadi'ah, trickery. The buying and selling are from the purest ways of earning, as long as these two are free of deception and trickery. And they are free from selling forbidden goods and from dealing in that which is forbidden, and usury, riba. So if buying and selling is free of things which corrupt it, then it is from the purest means of earning. And he brings the next part of the phrase, إِذَا بِيعَ فِي أَسْوَاقِ الْمُسْلِمِينَ. If the buying is done in the marketplaces of the Muslims. Shaykh Fawzan said, whatever is brought to the marketplaces of the Muslims, then do not ask about it. That which is brought to the marketplaces of the Muslims, then do not ask about it. Because the origin is permissibility, unless it is something about which it is known that it is something forbidden. In the asl, the origin is that what's brought to the marketplaces of the Muslim is permissible. Unless it's something that we know, no, this thing here is forbidden. He said, على حكم الكتاب والسنة, in accordance with the ruling of the book and the Sunnah. Shaykh Fawzan said, such that the well-known conditions for trade are fulfilled. So if the 7 well-known conditions for trade are fulfilled, then the transaction will be correct. And as for what is sold, if the 7 well-known conditions, and we mentioned a footnote which will follow inshaAllah, the 7 well-known conditions for trading are fulfilled, then the transaction is correct, and what is sold is halal, is lawful. And the origin is that the marketplaces of the Muslims are established upon that basis. In a footnote they mention, with regard to the 7 well-known conditions for a business transaction to be correct, they mention them very briefly, just giving the title of each. And they are ar-rida, mutual consent. The ones involved in the transaction are mutually pleased to be buying and selling that item. Secondly, ar-rashad, the one involved, engaged in that transaction, he is suitable to be involved in business transactions. He's allowed to take part, he's suitable, and he's allowed and possible for him to be involved in transactions. And they mention in some of the explanations of the books mentioned after that, so it's not permissible for a person who is, a child of the age of discernment, or a foolish one who doesn't have a full mental capacity, to be involved in a business transaction, if their guardian does not give permission, does not permit that transaction. So the second condition he mentions from the 7 conditions for trade are rashad, being suitable to be involved in trading. Thirdly, that the thing which is sold is some property, wealth property, from which permissible benefit can be taken. Thirdly, that the item sold is owned by the one who's selling it, or he has permission granted to him to sell it at the time of the contract by its owner or by the legislator. The fifth condition they mention is the ability to take and receive it. That it's an item which can be taken, it can be sold, and receipt can be taken of it. And again, as a side point, they mention, they say, for example, because on the basis of a hadith, they say such as you can't sell a slave, a runaway slave. A slave who has run away from his master can't sell him. You can buy my runaway slave. Even if the person could go after him and chase him and maybe catch him, that's not permissible. Or there has to be ability to take receipt of the item being sold. The sixth condition is that the price is something known. The price is fixed. The price is known, rather. The price is known. And what is being paid for, likewise, is known. And seventhly, that it is a deal which is being concluded. The deal itself is being concluded, that's it. It is not being made a condition for something else. And this is just a part of something else. This here, no, this is a deal, a business deal between two people, is concluded. That's it. And I'll give you a reference there. Al-Mubdi of Ibn Muflih, Al-Rawd, Al-Murabba, and Manar al-Sabiyyah. And these side examples I gave here are from the notes to Manar al-Sabiyyah. So back to the main text then. So having said, Shaykh Fawzan having said that if the seven conditions are fulfilled, then the selling is correct and the item which is sold is permissible, and that's the origin of what happens in the markets of the Muslims. Then he said, he's saying, مِنْ غَيْرِ أَنْ يَدْخُلَهُ تَغْرِيرٌ أَوْ ظُلْمٌ أَوْ غَدْرٌ. As long as no deception or oppression or treachery enters into it. Shaykh Fawzan said, if deception enters into a transaction and an unknown factor and an element of chance, then it will be forbidden, haram, because it has become a case of gambling. If that happens, it becomes a case of gambling, or a case of khida', trickery, swindling, such that he shows something which is not the actual reality. He shows an item in an appearance which is not the true reality, and this is called at-tadlis, giving a false impression to something. And it is, and he defines it, manifesting an item on sale in a form which pleases the one who looks at it, when it is in its reality, when it's in its unapparent state, something different to that. He moves on to saying, our dhulm, for as long as dhulm, oppression, does not enter into the sale. He said, such that the owner has been compelled, been forced to sell it. Such that the item, rather, has been such the owner has been compelled or forced to sell it, that he was made to view the transaction. For a business transaction can only be an taradin, by mutual consent. He sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, إِنَّمَا الْبَيْءُ an taradin, that a business transaction can only be by mutual consent. In the footnote we mentioned the reference for the hadith reported by Ibn Majah and Ibn Hibban from Abu Sa'id al-Khudri radiyallahu anhu, and that Abu Sayri said in Misbah al-Zajaja, its chain of narration is sahih, its narrators are reliable. And Shaykh Albani said it is sahih, authentic. Then Shaykh Fawzan said, Allah the Most High said, يا أيها الذين آمنوا لا تأكلوا أموالكم بينكم بالباطل إلا أن تكون تجارة عن تراض منكم. Ayah Surah An-Nisa, the 4th Surah, Ayah 29, again with the explanation. O you who believe, do not devour the wealth of each other unjustly, except and unless it is a business transaction by mutual consent. Shaykh Fawzan said, so for the correctness of the sale, there is a condition that there is consent, pleasure and consent of the seller, and that he freely chooses to do so and is not compelled to do it, because compelling him is a pressure, forcing him to sell something he doesn't want to sell. Then Shaykh Fawzan mentions an exception. He said, unless the forcing him to sell is due to a right that is due, such that he is a person who has debts upon him and he refuses to pay them back. For in that case, the judge or the ruler can intervene and can sell from his property what will be sufficient to pay off his debts, even if he is not pleased with that. Because this is compulsion due to a right. A right that's due upon him. He's got to pay his right, he's refusing to give this right. Then he can be compelled by the person in authority. The Shaykh said, and therefore they said, the sale of a person who does so by compulsion is not correct, unless it is on account of a right. إِلَّا بِحَقٍّ. That's why Shaykh Fawzan ends explanation of this point. As a side point, Shaykh Salih al-Suhaimi, Hafidhullah, he said, the restriction of the author in his saying that it is performed in the marketplaces of the Muslims, this is a point which requires examination, because buying and selling is permissible even in other than the marketplaces of the Muslims. Is it not permissible to buy and sell along with the Jews and Christians? Is it permissible or not permissible? It is permissible that you can buy and sell, or you can buy and sell and have mutual dealings and lease out and rent. This is a matter about which two people will not disagree. And therefore the author, rahimahullah, restricting it by his saying, in the marketplaces of the Muslims, I don't see that there is a necessity for that here at this point. And rather, whoever wishes to buy and sell, then let him buy and sell as he wishes in the lands of the Muslims, the lands of the Jews, or the lands of the Christians, in the lands of the disbelievers, whatever. However, with the condition that that transaction does not aid them upon something false and futile, or upon causing harm to the Muslims. For example, selling weapons to a disbeliever who is at war with the Muslims, that would not be permissible.